Okay, here is part 2 of the eyes PowerPoint. So now we're going to look at objective data. So we're checking for the visual acuity, so how well can the person see? And most of you have had eye exams, and you know that they have you look at different charts. Sometimes they have letters, sometimes they have numbers, sometimes arrows pointing one way or another. This particular chart is called a Snellen chart. Do you know how to read a Snellen chart? Well, let's talk about that. So if the person is looking at the chart, and we will look at it in lab a little bit closer so you can actually see the chart, but each line has different letters, and then off to the side, if the person read that line, it says how good their vision is. Now, when we think of perfect vision, we think about vision being 20/20. So what exactly does 20/20 mean? Well, what it means is if the person is reading at 20/20 level, it means that they are standing 20 feet from the chart, and they could see that chart. The person who has normal vision could see that chart from 20 feet. So that means that their vision is pretty normal or pretty good. If they have anything below 20/20, like 20/15, 20/13, 20/10, that means they're better than 20/20. So that means they're standing 20 feet away, and a person with normal vision would have to be 13 feet away to see that if their vision was 20/13. If they are standing 20 feet away, and they have something called 20/30 vision or 20/40 or 20/50, that means that a different person could read that from that distance. So in other words, if they have 20/30 vision, they are standing at 20 feet away and they can read that particular line. But a person with normal vision could read that line from 30 feet away. So where you have to read it at, or your patient has to read it at 20 feet, someone with normal vision could be back as far as 30 feet and still be able to read it. So the higher the bottom number, above 20, the worse the vision. The lower the number, the better the vision. Then we have something called a Jaeger card or a pocket card, and this helps to check near vision. And again, we'll have this in lab this week, so you'll be able to see it. And this is where we hold a little pocket card, and we hold it about 2 feet away, or have the person hold it about 2 feet away from them, and then they're going to read the letters that they see, and we'll see what their near vision is. Again, we look at 20/20, 20/30, all of those same measurements. And when you get into lab, this is going to make a little more sense, because then you'll actually be able to see it, and we will review it with you as well. Visual field tests, we have something called a confrontation test. Whoops. And if you look at page 292, it talks about that confrontation test. So I'm just going to get over to that page right now. Let's see. It's at the top of the page, and it talks about sensitivity with a moving target. So please read through that so that you understand how that confrontation test works. We also have the peripheral vision testing. You can see that on page 293. A lot of times they don't do it quite the same way anymore, but it used to be like you could come from the sides, and as soon as the person saw your fingers, so you'd get real close to them, your hands, and as soon as they saw it, they would say, "I can see your fingers moving." So I'm actually seeing the fingers out here moving, even though I'm looking straight ahead. That's your peripheral vision. Now, because that's really not a extremely specific way of doing it, you'll look through the little camera thing, the little eye machine at the eye doctor, and you might see little waves of things here, up here, and going all over. You'll see little waves here and there, and you have to say where you see them. For testing extraocular muscle function, a couple tests that we do, one is the corneal light reflex. This is known as the Hirschberg test. You can see this on page 292. This is where you would want, so we're going to do this in lab, but if you were looking at the person and you could see light reflecting on their right eye, say if you use the face of a clock and you looked at the 10 o'clock position, you should see it reflecting at the 10 o'clock position on the other eye as well. So we'll do that in lab and it'll make more sense when you see it, but that's the corneal light reflex. As long as the cornea is equal on both sides and there's no bulges or no problems, you should be able to see that light reflecting equally in both eyes, or in the same spot in both eyes. Okay, I was going to have you watch this video with me, but it takes a good 6-7 minutes. So you can go out into the plain PowerPoint and you can click on this and it'll show you how to do a cover test as well. And then we have something called the diagnostic positions test, and this is also known as your 6 cardinal positions of gaze. So this is where we would hold a finger out in front of them and have them follow with their eyes, not moving their head. So the 6 areas that we would do if we're looking at the face of a clock would be like 2 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 7 or 8 o'clock, right in there. So those would be the 6 positions of gaze. Now, you can read over page 292 that talks a little bit more about this test. One thing I want you to really think about when you're doing this is don't go too fast. We're kind of going slow, all right? Because if we go like this, that person has to move their eyes too fast, and that can be uncomfortable for them. All right, as we look at the external ocular structures, the structures of the eye, we want to inspect those. This is all in your book on pages 293 to 297. Things we're looking for are the general facial expression. We're looking for their eyebrows, looking at their eyelids and lashes. What is ptosis? Do you know what ptosis is? Look it up. It's in your textbook. And then looking at the eyeballs. And how about what is exophthalmos? Ptosis, you can read about it. It's it's the drooping of one eyelid. So if we look in this picture, the eyeball to the patient's right looks like it could be drooping. Exophthalmos is where we have that bug-eyed look, so the eyes are kind of popping out, and we see this with certain thyroid conditions. When we look at the conjunctiva, or that layer on the outside of the eye, it should be clear. What is conjunctivitis? Well, sometimes it's called pink eye. And people think, well, then it isn't clear, it's pink. But what actually happens is the structures underneath that clear will inflame, so the pink mucous membrane of the lower eyelid, or the eyelid itself, will take on that red-pink look, and you can get some bloodshot eyes as well, and that is conjunctivitis. So it's an inflammation of the conjunctiva, and again, also known as pink eye. Then we have the sclera, which is the white of the eye. We expect it to look, pretty white. China white, when do you see this? We should see it being white all the time. That's normal. Sometimes it can be gray, blue, or muddy. And then sometimes we can have small brown macules or freckles and dots. So China white is what we expect to see it. If it looks more gray, blue, or muddy, you'll see this more with some of the darker races, such as with African Americans. If you look at page 294 in your book, going down to like the second to the last paragraph, it talks about it. Also in dark-skinned people, it says you normally may see small brown macula or freckles on the sclera. So these are not foreign bodies. They are not lesions or anything that is abnormal. It is just something that can normally happen. So are there any other deviations when you look at your readings? So in other words, if you can look through page 294 and see if there's anything else that might stick out for you. Then we talk about the lacrimal apparatus. So these are your tear ducts, and when one gets sad, one will cry, and that is where the tears come from, are the lacrimal apparatus. So we're going to inspect the anterior eyeball structures, looking through them, looking at that cornea and lens. We're looking for opacities, which are clouding. It should be nice and clear. If we see clouding, then we would expect that there might possibly be some type of a cataract or something else going on. We're going to look at the iris and the pupil. What is anisocoria? This is also in your book. You can look this word up yourself. This is one of your vocabulary words that I know that you need to know about. Pupillary light reflex, how do you record the findings? You'll learn about how to record those in lab. We're going to compare how the eye is at rest and then when we shine a light into it, and we'll record it in a certain way. It's in your book, but you'll also learn about it in lab. Accommodation, that's that one I told you, looking far and bringing it in closer and looking nearer. The red reflex, what is this? So when you shine a light into the eye and it hits the back, the retina part of the eye, in the back of the eye, because it's so rich with blood vessels back there, you might get a flash of red light back at you, and we call that the red reflex. So you'll learn how to look at that in lab as well. It's really cool when people see that red reflex for the first time. We talked about myopia and hyperopia. If you look at page 299 in your book, it shows you how there's pictures on how the lens is actually changed with each of these, and you'll see where it's elongated with the hyperopia, or excuse me, the myopia, and it's shortened with the hyperopia. So read through that page again. That's on page 299. The optic disc, when we're looking at the optic disc, what are the normal characteristics that one would expect to see? If you look on page 300, it gives you a nice little synopsis of what you should see. We should have a creamy yellow, orange to pink optic disc for color. If the shape should be round or oval, there should be some distinct margins there. So go ahead and read that on page 300. And that is all that I have for this video. One other thing that I would like you to look at is going into the back of your book, starting on page 312. There are some abnormalities there, and if you look at the objectives for your exam 1, which we're having on September 24th. I highlighted some of these, and I would like you to be able to identify them from a description. One of them we already talked about, the exophthalmos, blepharitis, chalazion, hordeolum, or a sty in the eye, ectropion, ptosis. Those are all different things. So make sure that you look through those, the ones that I highlighted on your objectives sheet. And that's all I have for you. Thank you.